Welcome to Cloud Dialogues 2.
42.
Welcome, Georgia. How's it going? Still in summer over there in the US?
Good. I'm enjoying the heat in Texas.
So this is Cloud Dialogues, where we talk about AI and cloud and all topics in between with a bit of an enterprise flavour. Today we're joined by Aubrey Blanche. Welcome, Aubrey. Do you want to just say a couple of words about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I've taken a bit of a circle back in my career. So for about 13 years, I was a leader in enterprise technology, had roles at Palantir, Atlassian, and Cultureamp. And nowadays I'm primarily working as kind of an AI ethicist, but really in, my role at the Mathpath, which is my consultancy. A lot of what I do is I help folks kind of identify their values, and then I help them either build or transform the systems that make those real. So that's kind of crosses humans, people, and culture, as well as technology implementation. I would say most of my work right now is AI adoption, not exclusively, but it's mostly AI. And the reason I was so excited for this conversation was just because, I often surprise my clients. I'm like, it's 20% a tech problem and 80% a human problem. And that's maybe not the distribution they thought it was.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for coming, and thanks for coming on. We'll go through the news articles first. So, Georgia, what do we got here? Agent security is big this week. Well, it feels like it's been big for the last couple of weeks because OpenAI had some sort of, I don't know, GPT hacked into some startup, and now Anthropic is something as well. What's that all about?
So I have some thoughts on this, which are really influenced by Timnit Gebru, who's the ED at Dare, which is like, that headline could either be written as like, oh, these models are so smart and they're hacking things, or like, we need to have better network security. And like in the case of like ChatGPT kind of hacking Hugging Face, like they had taken some of the guardrails off the model that would have prevented that. And I think it is an example of these frontier models, like marketing spin of constantly trying to justify how excellent their models are, right? Because their ridiculous valuations like depend on this, we're building Terminator or Skynet, we're going to change the world thing. And like the media just kind of like regurgitates press releases right now instead of actually thinking about like, oh, maybe were they just not following safety protocols that they should have been if they're dealing with this very dangerous thing?
I mean, it's kind of to be expected, really, but I mean, I guess they knew it happened. It's not like it's happening behind the scenes, and they're just publicizing this particular instance, but who knows what other instances there's been.
Totally.
So,
well, and the ChatGPT one, they didn't know. Hugging Face came to them.
that was the one that
Hugging Face was trying to do their diagnostics with a closed source model, and they kept hitting guardrails and couldn't actually do the investigation because the model couldn't tell the difference between an incident response and an actual attempt to hack someone. And so they ended up having to go to an open weight Chinese model to actually do the investigation to understand what happened. And so I think that's interesting in this moment where we're having the US is talking about banning open weight models.
Yeah.
There's a lot tied up in there that I think is just of the moment that I think the headlines don't actually help us understand what's going on underneath it and what's useful.
And it's convenient that it's around the same time as the White House wanting to stamp their authority on, which models are allowed to be, used by foreign nationals and which aren't. So it's an interesting time as the model's getting better and better.
I try really hard to stay away from anthropomorphizing terms.
Yeah.
I don't think it helps us interact with that technology in a way that is not helpful for humans. So I love people. I love that.
Yeah, we don't trademark anything here on Cloud Dialogues, so you are welcome to use that.
Okay.
Georgia, Copilot. We're talking about Copilot again, 2 episodes in a row. Your favorite topic. Microsoft reported 30 million paid Microsoft 365 Copilot seats. That seems a lot. And it seems to be, what the article says they're doubling quarter over quarter. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's become a utility, right? Like when occasionally I get messages from executives asking what are they getting, what is their return on investment for the cost of Copilot? And I usually tell them,
Yeah.
nothing. It's like email. What are you going to do? Get rid of email? I don't think so.
Yes.
I think the capability is getting better, but I think one thing is, people have often said that like Copilot doesn't kind of have the same performance as like an Opus or like a Fable, for example. And obviously, now Microsoft has opened the MCP in ways that, previously it wasn't. But Microsoft has always been a company like post the Bill Gates era where they won on distribution and they knew that. And so like important to know that like Microsoft's strategy doesn't require them to have the best product. Not to say it's a terrible product. I don't want to, malign that, although I have opinions about which tools I like. Microsoft doesn't win because they have they're a distribution play and that people are dependent on their software. But I think the thing that I'm seeing with clients who are choosing to kind of depend on Cowork and Copilot is that it is actually data residency and enterprise security that are the reason.
Yes.
People like, I was just talking to someone, and to be fair, at my full-time gig, I'm at a nonprofit called the Ethics Center. We have a gradient level based on Dante's Circles of Hell of how I feel about Outlook that day. And so, like, I'm not alone, I'm sorry. But a lot of it is they go, yeah, like the particular feature set of a different tool is better, but like Google has like data, the rights to your data in a way that you're giving up a lot of IP rights, or like if you're using Anthropic, if you're in Australia, like I am, there is no from the web app or the desktop app way to get data residency in Australia at present. They've kind of said 2027, but like to get Claude to have data residency in Australia, you have to go through like the developer API and like build your own front end, which is not an accessible solution for most folks. So Microsoft is kind of actually winning on enterprise security, which I think is a really interesting strategy. But yeah, I think if you just say like Copilot isn't Fable, I think you miss that Microsoft is probably making a deliberate choice because they know what their value add is, which is IP and security and data sovereignty.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, Meta's free cash flow fell 90% year over year to 784 million. And I think, they're saying investors are punishing the company because the path from their investment to monetization is not clear, right, at the moment.
Well,
It's very two contrasting things there.
My question is about Mark Zuckerberg's ability to monetize anything.
Yeah.
Right.
He squeezed it all out of Facebook, and the next thing has always been difficult for it.
Yeah, it does seem like whenever I talk to people that have relations with Meta, it all seems a bit dystopian.
Yeah. Especially the fact they're doing the keyboard, the recording keystrokes and stuff of their staff on their computers. That was something that came out a couple of months ago as well to train their agents.
Yeah, and obviously they're getting sued now, workplace discrimination claim, because the claim is that an algorithm, like what the headline says, which is wrong, and I think this is actually important. They're like, oh, an algorithm targeted people for layoffs. That's not what happened. What is being claimed is that an algorithm did not appropriately take into account protected leave in ways that had a discriminatory impact. So like, and this is actually something that it frustrates me a bit about kind of the folks who care about justice and anti-discrimination, which obviously I am like all team anti-discrimination. That's what I've spent most of my career working on. But I think one of the things with AI that happens across the spectrum is that people have emotional reactions to things that actually aren't related to the facts of the case. And if we actually want to prevent the problem, we have to be quite specific about what the problem was. So it's not that I want to malign folks who are worried about algorithmic discrimination, because it is real and it is a problem. But if you mischaracterize the mechanism by which it happens, you can't fix it. And so that's my critique, is like, it's not constructive or useful. And so in the case of Meta, what happened is like one of the factors that some kind of algorithmic system allegedly took into account was like keystrokes in certain type of activity, which folks who are on parental leave or FMLA would not be displaying that. And the model was not appropriately set up such that it like had allowances for that. And so what it landed on is something that in the legal term is called disparate impact. So you don't have to prove intent. It's just like you made a decision and it had a disparate impact above a legal threshold. So is it still discriminatory? Yes. Is it still a problem? Yes. But I don't think we're served of being like, oh, evil computer is ableist. It's like, no, humans made design decisions and
Yeah.
used technology that resulted potentially in discrimination. So anyway, I just want to call that out, that like, for those of us that are kind of human advocates, one of the skills that I think is most essential with AI ethics, I had someone call me out. They were like, you mischaracterized that study. I was like, I'm going to go issue a correction. So like I'm susceptible to, but I'm trying really hard to be disciplined about describing the problem with specificity.
Yeah. And it's about context, right?
Yeah.
One of the things.
I'm not telling you shouldn't be upset, but like, let's be specific about what was said.
Yeah, I think it's another one of those things where AI can be a massive amplifier of good, but it can also be a massive amplifier of garbage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is-
absolutely. I mean, I think in general, when you look at kind of the history of technology, and there is a lot of debate within academic circles. So for folks who don't know, in addition to my professional career, I'm a master's student in AI ethics at Cambridge. So like I do the implementation practical stuff, but I also love to sit in my flat and read research studies and think about all of this. And there was a huge academic debate about whether AI is what we call a normal technology, meaning like, is it similar to other technologies in ways that are predictable and can help us understand it, or is it a fundamentally new thing? I actually think for the most part, it's a normal technology, like, which again is a contestable claim. Technology in general very rarely creates a new thing. It often accelerates or expands things that already exist. And when you look at AI, like, is it moving faster? And so people are, feeling fantastical about it. Yes. But that's the thing for me is like, I look at AI as a normal technology. And when I talk to my clients, like, I think some people on the internet are like, you're really anti-AI because you're very critical. I'm like, I'm not. I actually just think that there's a lot of people making billion-dollar business strategies based on the product marketing of someone who needs you to believe it to justify the commas in their bank account. And like, I think all of those decisions you're making based on those premises are going to be a waste of money for your business, and they're not going to be good for your people. But if we take the temperature down on the unicorns for a second, there's really cool stuff we can do with this. And wouldn't we rather live in the real world and actually do the cool things instead of make bad bets and chase something that's probably not going to accrue to you?
Okay, China is attacking the frontiers again. We've got Alibaba releasing Qwen 3.8 Max, hot on the heels of Kimi K3. It's kind of like a little bit boring at this point. The frontier companies are, getting better. The Chinese models are getting better, and they're pretty much on par, which is good for competition. And, the only problem is it takes a little bit of time for those models to become available, out of China. But the good thing is they can be hosted pretty much anywhere. So if you've got enough money and enough GPUs, so yeah, that it looks like it's now over fast, better and more capable than even Kimi K3, which was like almost Fable level. That's still happening, and it'll continue to happen.
Well, and for folks who are kind of watching Kimi K3, that was fun. Just like a little popcorn. But what's really interesting is it's no longer available on the Chinese internet, but it leaked, was like a transcript of what I think was a phone call of, I think it was the CEO of DeepSeek. It was the CEO of one of the like Tencent or Alibaba. I can't remember who, but they were talking about like kind of China's strategic weakness in AI. And what it basically came down to, they were like, it's not researchers. Like there's a lot of Chinese researchers in the US, but it's not like the good ones to go to the US and the other ones stay here. Like that's quite mixed. Like they have incredible depth of talent locally, but it's actually kind of compute. They're like, even though, their constraint has caused them to be able to build amazing models on what is kind of inferior hardware, right? And a lot of that is distillation, which Anthropic is very angry about. Right. They're like, we stole everything. Why are you stealing things from us? But he was basically talking about the fact that like the number of GPUs and like high class compute that they have access to is actually meaningfully limiting. And he was saying it's not just about training frontier class models. It's also about having the compute ability to do research, to actually identify new ways of building. Because I think there's a lot of people that are rightfully kind of talking about the fact that like scaling And like brute forcing model performance is probably no longer, like there's not a linear relationship. There was for a while, but I think we're hitting a ceiling on just brute force scale becoming viable, both because I think it has diminishing returns, but also because people are running out of data.
That's true.
Louisa's newsletter, if folks don't read that, I really love. It's mostly about AI governance, but she had some really good content on that.
The last one is around OpenAI claims its next model is producing original mathematical research. It says OpenAI published 10 results. It says it's resolve or substantially advanced long-standing problems in geometry, coding theory, complexity theory. So I guess that's probably eventually going to happen. But yeah, I guess watch this space. And that's probably, if that's true, that's, if it's actually creating new knowledge out of, and mathematics is one area that it could probably do that, because obviously there's systems thinking and that sort of thing where you could do that rather than just regurgitating stuff that it's already trained. So,
Totally. And I was reading into this, and Gary Marcus has written a couple of things about this on his Substack over the last couple of days. But one, like, we don't know. So it solved like 10 conjectures, which is cool, like objectively. But the question is, how many did it try to solve, right? Like, did it try to solve 10 and get a 10 out of 10, or did it try to solve 2000 and got 10 out of 2000?
Yeah.
Let me be clear. That answer doesn't make it less cool. It just gives us some context. But also there were some mathematicians on X who were talking about like, these are genuinely interesting, but like there was no new theory generated. So it was using existing theory to solve these problems, which again is interesting and a contribution. But I always just read the market with a bit of skepticism to be like, what is true and what is useful about that? There was also some of it, like I think 4 out of the 10 was replicated by another kind of frontier class model over the last couple of days. So Astra or GPT 5.7 or whatever they're going to call it is interesting. But also the thing that makes me a bit crazy is in all of these, because this happens every 3 months, that something like this. And they're like, oh, so it's soon going to be able to do everything. It's like, these are closed-spaced problems. And that doesn't make it cool that they've solved this. But like, just because you're good at math doesn't mean that you're good at other things. Like, there's a reason the SAT has a math and verbal section. Like, we all know someone who is like brilliant at, say, technology and like really struggles at human relationships, or people who are beautiful writers who really struggle with maths, right? Like, I also just would like remind folks that just because, or like people like, oh, this model performed amazing on this benchmark, that doesn't mean it's not a dumb intern on another problem. And so I just offer that like, I don't want to diminish that it's cool, but this like, oh, therefore it's going to take over the world and become AGI is like incredibly silly.
I know. It's just another step of improvements, right? That we couldn't have even thought about 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's remarkable, but we can hold that it's remarkable without painting a picture of something that it's not.
It's all over, Aubrey. It's all over.
The machines
will rule the world.
Are you worried about AI taking your job? And I'm like, honestly, I'm not. I'm really not.
No.
Me either.
Although if it does take over your job, maybe you're not useful.
I would be happy if AI could take.
Well, that's the thing is like these frontier labs are like, oh, we're going to automate away all white collar labor. I'm like, can you please get the AI to like wash my car and do my dishes?
Yeah. No.
Oh, but I think, Aubrey, this is a great question. And this is where I see is like, when I think about fundamentally as humans, what is really hard? And like an example of that is robotics, right? Robotics is really hard. I am not seeing evidence right now of AI significantly advancing robotics.
I would say in China, like what the Chinese are doing with robotics is insane, like incredible. And I think the move to like moving away from transformer models to world models is where we're going to see that. So I particularly, you kind of got to pick a lane because AI is a bunch of things. And I'm much more on the like sovereign AI, small language models, like little task specific stuff is like my nerd area, and like constitutional AI and stuff like that. But I think world models in terms of robotics applications is interesting. Do I think we're there yet? No. Do I want a robot in my house? No, my whole house is dumb. Like there's nothing in my house that listens to me. My fridge has just cooling capability. My partner lives in like a surveillance
Unless
state
it's
and
going
it
to
stresses me
unload
out.
my
But
dishwasher.
so I think it's an interesting question to be like, and I say like, who decides what is automatable and what is desirable to automate? And maybe like the slightly snarky, I saw a meme that was like, why do we let these people who seem like they don't have a lot of friends build technology to be everyone's friend?
I know that's a good point.
Like,
They've got no experience in that.
I wonder that because the things that are being prioritized in the marketing of AI as automating, if you talk to someone from a different walk of life, that's not the thing they would pick. And so I think it's important to always look at who's setting the agenda, who's writing the narrative, what are their motivations and the way they see the world. And that doesn't necessarily have to be nefarious, right? We just tend to solve problems that we have. And it's a bunch of incredibly wealthy white men, and they're going to have a particular set of things they think are important in a problem that a single low-income woman of color is probably going to have a different agenda about what's worth solving with AI. And so I just like put that out there. Not that I'm trying, I mean, I do have opinions about what's correct, but like to always say, like, when you read that headline, when you see that narrative, when you see that news, like, who's writing that? And why might that narrative serve them? And if we think critically about the story that we're being told, how much of it holds up versus how much of it reinforces kind of a false belief about the technology that's not actually useful. But it's not binary, right? Like, you don't have to be
I
like,
think
AI is all trash to be just a bit questioning.
no. And AI as replacing white collar jobs is a great example of this, right? Of course, the frontiers are going to say that it can replace jobs because who is buying their product? What are they motivated by? Enterprises are buying their product. And of course, executives just want to smash their bottom line,
Yeah.
right? We're going to replace people with AI. So, but the reality of that is, I would say, is vastly different. Like, yes, AI is capable.
Yeah. I mean, well, and again, if you go back to kind of the economic analysis, and certainly Cory Doctorow, his new book, The Reverse Centaur's Guide to Life After AI, goes into this in depth. He also just did an interview on Jon Stewart's The Weekly, which is totally worth listening to. But he talks about this is like, right, okay, so in order to justify like Anthropic or OpenAI's current valuation, the only way to justify that revenue multiple, which is truly bonkers, is if their total addressable market is all of the human labor supply. That is the only way to justify that number. And the reality is the technology cannot do those things. And there are certain, like the hallucinations and all of that are architectural features of this type of model. They're not resolvable. And so it is unlikely that these models can replace all of human labor. And so there is this weird collective delusion going on amongst a specific set of people with money to do this that need us to believe that they're coming for their jobs. But if you see in the last like 8 months, like OpenAI put out that white paper about like labor policy, and suddenly Dario and Sam are going out and say, actually, it's not going to take all the jobs. Do you want to know why? They were selling to investors over here, and now they're remembering that during the French Revolution, what gets the guillotines out is the middle class losing their economic security. And so they realize that they are trying to play a very delicate game where they justify the valuations that they need because of all the capital they've taken in and the trash revenue that they're making on that revenue without getting guillotined. I'm describing historical patterns. But like, if you look at it that way, Cory, who I really appreciate, is basically saying like, AI will exist after this bubble, but we're in a moment. We don't know when the bubble will pop, but this like crazy Skynet take over the world, you can trade at 150 times your revenue multiple is truly insane.
Mhm. And that's going all the way down to all the startups and everyone that's doing this as well, and all the funding that's out there. It's like it's all layered on top of this. It's a house of cards, right?
It is. And I also just like, not to make it about demographics, but I think about the fact that like VC funding, like 2% of VC funding, like goes to women-led startups. And it's like, so I've been like a woman executive in business. I genuinely cannot imagine keeping my job and like running a company where I go to an investor and I'm like, hey, I'm burning $27 for every dollar of revenue that I bring in. I think we just need to acknowledge that this is facilitated by the fact that we enable men with bad unit economics in ways that when you look at the data, women have better economics on their businesses. They get investors better ROI. It's related is what I'm saying. It's like we would not be tolerating a Black woman behaving in that way. Not for a moment.
So AI ethics, well, we've already talked about it.
I think people, when they think about ethics, they often think about it as this like, conceptual, complicated thing. And the reality is ethics is actually a part of everyday decisions, right? It's really just about like my boss, Dr. Simon Longstaff, who is an ethicist here in Sydney, he talks about its values and principles. So values, what is good, principles, kind of what is right. But the reality is when we deal with technology or we make a purchasing decision, we're always making an ethical decision also. And so when I talk about AI ethics, my research has looked at attitudes of the AI elite. It's looked at risks of companion AI. It's looked at international relations and how that relates to AI sovereignty for middle powers. And all of those things are considered ethics. People often think of ethics as this fluffy thing off to the side, and it's actually a core part of how we make decisions. What I try to do is make it clear and intentional what ethical and normative decisions you're making, because you're always making ethical decisions. And the question is, are you doing it on purpose or not? And are you actually checking to make sure that your impact lines up with what you intended to do in the first place? Because I would say my boss loves to quote Socrates, talking about the unexamined life. And so in many ways, ethics is just about looking at the values that your choices enable and making sure that you're doing it on purpose.
Yes. I guess organizations need to be a bit deliberate. Ethics needs to be a deliberate decision, like corporate. I don't know. Have we really heard much about corporate ethics in the past? Probably not. Like every organization kind of does its own thing and has its own policies. And then sustainability came in, governments were, forcing specific, sustainability guidelines and stuff for, large organizations. And now we're sort of talking about ethics in an AI perspective. Do you think that will, I guess, become more of a discussion point, I guess, as the models get better?
Mm.
Does that sort of ring true?
I think like the reality is like every organization has their own ethical culture. Now, whether they've done it intentionally or not is a great question. I would say a lot of times businesses think about ethics in terms of like ESG. So they're like diversity and sustainability and philanthropy. And that's certainly true. Like I've run an ESG department, but the reality is, when I think about enabling leaders on ethics, it's different. It's, within AI, a lot of the, like one of the things that I think has the most ethical content is what is the objective of your AI adoption program? And I often tell my clients, productivity, I do not believe is an ethical objective. I also do not believe it is an effective business objective. And so I love when those two things are the same. And they're like, what? And I'm like, so I want to talk to you about what happens when you prioritize and your outcome objective is productivity. I'm not saying productivity is a bad thing. I'm saying when you make it your optimization point, what happens is you've told everyone the goal is make more stuff. There's no critical thinking in that. Because is every business decision, is the right response to every business decision, make another thing? No. Sometimes the answer is don't do anything, right? And there are many business problems for which AI is not a solution. That doesn't preclude that there are business problems where it is. And so I offer that, when I'm doing AI adoption with a client, we talk about, like I'm thinking of one program I'm doing right now where the objective is to adopt AI in ways that allow us to further our mission, which is, their particular mission is X. And the reason that's helpful is because productivity or efficiency, the other, popular one, are tools in the toolbox. there might be some processes that making them more efficient with AI actually furthers the ability to have impact. But there might be a broken process that speeding it up will just produce shit faster.
Yeah.
And the reason it's helpful is because that kind of objective actually requires the individuals to be respected for the expertise in their context and make the right decision for the organization. So when I'm talking to commercial clients, it's often about creating customer value. And what that does is that can give staff a set of skills and tools, both technical and ethical, to look at their context and go, which of these problems does AI help with? And does solving that problem move the business forward and create value for the customer? And so rather than this uncritical, I just need to use 6 AI tools because it's going in my performance review, you give each person who's already bought into the mission, right? Like if they work there, they're like, I'm on board for that, respects their agency and their expertise to use technology in a way that meets a shared goal. But that's an ethical concern because also when you optimize for efficiency or productivity, you often do these things like, you're like, oh, the human in the loop will solve everything. There's no human in the loop if someone is given 72 decisions an hour to adjudicate. And so if you're optimizing for efficiency, you're saying the most important thing is to make everything faster, not take a moment, reflect on, do we make this faster? Do we get rid of it? Do we fully redesign it? Because with this technology, it should work differently. And so I just offer that because I think people are like, oh, ethics isn't practical. Everything I do with my clients is ethically based and deeply practical that balances your organizational objectives with caring for the humans inside it. And I fundamentally believe those are not opposing ideas, right? If you only care about your quarterly earning results or boosting individual productivity in the short term, sure, have a productivity objective. But it's not going to last 18 months. Like we see data that folks who are being forced to use AI, 73% of them, I think Glean showed, are looking for new jobs. Like people don't like it. And so I just offer that like business strategy and ethics are kind of the same thing.
I was going to say that about incentives, because incentives, human nature, and in companies, everyone's incentivized by something. I think it's more important, even with AI, that these incentives sort of align with all these different areas. It doesn't have to be super complex, but at least, if they cover all that stuff and then that kind of deals with that sort of thing. Because, I mean, token maxing, for one thing, it might be fun, but it's, incentivizing the wrong thing and using up too much
And like, I
resource.
mean, don't get into like the labor supply chain exploitation and the environmental impact and Jevons paradox and like all of this. But even just on a very basic level, like what other corporate initiative in history has ever been like, spend whatever you have to get this game that has really thin empirical specification? Like, and I say that to boards. And again, I'm the spicy consultant you bring in. I'm like, look, do you want to hit your objectives or do you want to do this? And they're like, what? And I'm like, let's just have a really honest conversation. Have you read the studies about how productivity accrues from AI adoption? And they're like, well, I'm like, so here's a bunch that show that 1, it doesn't really. And 2, individual productivity is not linearly related to team outcome achievement. It's a complex systems problem and it is addressable. That's what I've been doing my whole career. But like the way you are going about it is not going to get to the place you want to go. And so let's go a different way. And it is often a very hard conversation because the kind of product marketing that has become truth, like Stephen Colbert coined this word truthiness. And the concept is like, if you just say something enough times, it becomes true.
Yeah.
Humans actually confuse how often they've heard something for how correct it is. Like it's just a known cognitive bias. And so a lot of times I'm in kind of boardrooms or executive rooms and I'm saying like, look, I'm not trying to challenge that you want to drive the business forward, but like the research that validates the way you're going doesn't really exist. Like you've been promised something and I get why you want it, but it's not going to get you there. And that I think is something there's just not enough people being willing to say, because as a consultant, it's hard. I've lost a lot of business because people don't like to hear it. The ones who do, we actually go do really cool things. And, we lean into participatory governance. So we ask all the staff how they're feeling. What are they worried about? What are they excited about? What guardrails do they want? How do they like to learn? And then we design the adoption program based on the particular risks and ethical concerns that they have. And we make it experimental, and we teach the staff skills and say, go play sit in the sandbox that we've designed for safety and risk management, but play with your job, figure out new ways to do things. But also you're allowed to decide where you don't want to use AI for reasons. And we'll talk about some of what those valid reasons are, which include, working, a client was kind of looking at applying AI to like the software development lifecycle. And one of the big things that came up in our work there was the engineers are worried about losing their skills, right? If they're just button pushers and code reviewers, like, I'm going to lose that. And so we said, we don't want to optimize just for output. So we're going to, one of my recommendations was we're going to build in rituals where in your sprint planning, a certain number of story points in that sprint have to be coded manually every sprint. And the reason is that it preserves your knowledge, but that means if your tool goes down, your team doesn't grind to a halt in the future. So it's protecting the agency and expertise of the individuals. It's protecting their ability to be a good companion to the AI, but it's also organizational and operational resilience. But if we were optimizing for going from 5 to 8 story points a day or whatever, we wouldn't be able to make that choice. And so we're taking a minor cut in speed of output for long-term resilience of output that also protects the human. And so that's an example of, like, to me, what ethics in action looks like. It's listening to people, involving them in adoption. And, often a lot of the things that are like the best things that get implemented when I work with a client are things an employee came up with themselves. And my job was just actually to discover it and scale it out across the team. Like, I didn't have the brilliant idea. I just created conditions for someone brilliant to tell me their idea. And I'm like, that's a much better way to do it than what I would have thought of. Let's figure out how to teach other people to do it that way as well. And when you do that, suddenly 10 other people feel confident to share their brilliant idea that then the business benefits from. But that wasn't because it was top down, you must use the tool. It was that you gave people care and respect to experiment, and then they build brilliant things with it. I just think that when you focus on productivity and efficiency and you kind of believe these narratives, you don't get those things which are the best parts about working with humans and also the best way to get business value.
And that's one of the things last, probably 10 to 15 years as cloud came about, organizations that sort of had innovative things released usually came out of experiments that people have done internally, and experiments allow you to learn. And if you have time to do that, then good things can happen, and you can work out what parts of the system that you're working in can be, improved or new things created. And AI has sort of amplified that to a new level where you can just do, ridiculous experiments around that. And I think it's even more important than ever to do these experiments to figure out, as you say, what parts of the system can be, where AI is useful and where it is not, because I think we're all still figuring that out.
So one of the other things is that often a lot of my clients were moving to like outcome-based as opposed to like task-based role descriptions, because so often like job descriptions have been lists of tasks. But in a moment of transition, like what changes the most about a job is actually the task list underneath its purpose. And so my research, and I'll probably, write a blog about this soon, is giving people clear areas of accountability and sort of an understanding of what their role is meant to achieve on a team or in an organization. And then having a couple of kind of outcome goals that are short term, that are flexible, but then actually also intentionally including learning oriented goals is really important. So when we look at motivation theory, for example, this is really important because if you have too many kind of rigid outcome goals in a moment of transformation, people end up optimizing for the wrong thing. And so, but making it clear to someone, like, you're here and the purpose of your role is to create this outcome. And how you do that might change as the technology changes or the organization shifts. but it gives that person a sense of purpose and agency because it gives them control over the underlying task list as long as they're meeting these kind of higher order objectives. And so again, that's another thing with AI adoption where people are like, that has nothing to do with the technology. And I'm like, correct, it doesn't. Like, in order to do AI adoption well, a deep understanding of how humans think and we're motivated and we move together and collaborate. Honestly, the hardest stuff that I work on is like, how do we do this with a group of humans who are probably all really well-meaning, but like are facing fear of change and like all of these other things. And you have to hold space for that human experience or your AI adoption program falls over.
You spoke a bit earlier about developers, pushing buttons and, sort of losing their skills a little bit. I think that's an opportunity for them to sort of move up a level as well, because if you let AI build the thing and make all the decisions, it's going to be very boring and not, probably not the outcome that you want. So historically, there's been, product managers and, all that sort of role where I think developers can have more, I guess they can have more agency to decide architectural aspects of what they're building, speak to the users more, take that opportunity to have that discussion because that's something that AI cannot do, right? Like you still need to talk to the humans who's going to use your software. AI can do the mundane build the thing once all those decisions have been made, but those there's a lot of it's very interesting actually to make those decisions and shape the product. So decision making is something that I guess AI can change who makes those decisions. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, some of my research looks at decision support systems. And yeah, I think on a basic level, like you thinking about a lot of people become software developers because they like solving problems, right? Like they like building stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
And so to take them away and just basically make them editors of reviewing things that they don't understand, like is not actually motivating to them as humans.
No.
Like it's not respecting but I've been doing some research on kind of what is the value of like pair programming, for example, because people often think that the value of pair programming is defect prevention. That's actually not the core value of pair programming. Pair programming creates resilient institutional knowledge and builds shared mental models for how systems work are their primary values. A team who didn't have enough licenses for the whole team. And so the way that they're doing code review is they now do something called pair prompting, where they sit together and they collaboratively craft a prompt. And then they use the prompt to do the thing they want to do. And then they collaboratively evaluate the output and rationalize the reasoning and produce their justification for why they've accepted the code before they push a commit. And I was like, this is genius. Because all of the things that appeal to a developer, they're still doing. It's that reasoning, it's problem solving, it's building, but you're using AI to speed up something that is a part that isn't essential, but you're preserving all of the cognitive architecture that exists to do that job. And so I offer that. It goes back to like, if all you want is efficiency, people are never going to come up with that solution that creates resilience. It protects cognitive capacity. It also means that they're shipping solutions faster. Like it hit all of those buckets, but it did not come from being like, just do more, everybody gets a tool. That was not the conditions that produced that. And so anyway, I just like look at people, what they're motivated by, what they like, and what they're uniquely brilliant at, and then design the system and how you implement the technology around those things as opposed to trying to railroad them. I also think there's research that shows that junior engineers, their code using AI have more defects in them. And so it aggressively puts up the review load on seniors. Like Amazon had that whole meeting where there was an outage because everybody's using AI code and they're like, okay, nothing goes to prod without senior sign off now. But I also think there's this potentially really amazing opportunity for senior folks, whether they're architects or just kind of principal devs, for us to build more mentorship and apprenticeship models into the way that we develop folks. Like everyone's like, oh, we're just going to get rid of the junior roles.
Yeah.
And first of all, tokens are now more expensive than interns, but also you're not going to have any seniors in 10 years if you don't hire them now and train them. But what a cool thing for a senior to get experience, not just using their knowledge to reason, but gaining the skill of explaining that reasoning to someone Like a lot of the seniors that I talk to love the idea of working with junior devs to say like, hey, I learned this stuff. Let's sit together and I'll walk you through why I made this architectural choice versus that one. And
Hmm.
so like, again, if you really lean into what's amazing about humans, you can have a prompt that generates 3 different architectures. And then you can look at them and decide which makes sense for your problem, but you can share that with a junior so they don't have to never develop skills because they're using AI.
Juniors have always been important, but they're even more important now than ever, in my view. But I
Yeah,
think we'll work out a new way of dealing with that. As you say, it's about explaining, and the seniors, like to. And when you explain something, you sometimes find flaws in what you're building as well.
totally. You're in the middle of defending an idea and then you figure out that you're wrong.
Oh shit, it's not going to work because of whatever X reason. I've
Oh,
had that many
highly
times.
relatable experience.
Exactly.
This is why narrative reads are so useful. I always think for organizations, I always say to executives, and like probably about 2% of the executives that I worked with are actually open to doing narratives. But I think it's just a massive way of vetting what you're trying to do, whether it's like quarterly planning, whether it's new strategic initiatives. There's just so much value in that compared to having slide mania and just like, it's just honestly, it makes me sad.
Yeah, I know, slides without much thought into them. And the problem is now AI can generate slides without much thought, and people will just use. I guess it depends on how important the deck is, but there's still that.
I can make so many slides. I can make like 100 beautiful slides every day.
But are they useful, Georgia?
Whether they're actually good or real or useful is another thing.
Yeah, but I think, this goes back to so much of why I'm so critical of kind of the mainstream narratives about AI is because when we take them as true that AI is inevitable, that it's going to replace all of this white collar labor, we are foreclosing the future. We are closing down the imaginative space in which people operate, which my spiciest version of the argument is you are stealing the best part of the future from us. And so I go back to this, whenever I see that narrative, it's always deconstruct it. What is the incentive behind that narrative? And does it truly map onto the facts on the ground? And if I accept that narrative, what am I rejecting? And that is rarely asked. And that is so much of what I do and why I don't worry about AI taking my job, because they're like, why aren't you worried about like AI is going to replace consultants? I'm like, my entire value as an advisor is that I have insight that extrapolates outside of sample. That is architecturally impossible for AI to do. And it's because I'm a human. It's because I read a ridiculous amount of stuff and I across domains. And so that is kind of, maybe that's like my ending mic drop for everybody, is when you hear a claim being made about AI or a proposition about a strategy for adoption, what narrative does that serve? Who does that narrative serve? And what does it foreclose as a possibility for us? And do I feel convicted that that's the right thing to do? So going back to, that's ethics, making decisions with intention. And if you get to that and you go, I think that narrative actually isn't serving, you are allowed to pick a different one. Like,
Exactly.
my vibe is like, I dare you to tell me it's impossible. Like, I dare you. What proof do you have that the thing I believe is true is impossible?
Food for thought. This has been quite interesting, but we
Oh,
have
good.
run out of time.
Oh,
Aubrey.
yeah. I don't want to keep you too long, but this has been so fun. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight. I just
no,
love
thank
getting
you for
to
joining.
nerd out because I think this stuff is so cool and there's so much we can do with it.
Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks,
Awesome.
Georgia. And thank you, listeners, for listening or watching or whatever you're doing. And we'll catch you next time on Cloud Dialogues. Thank you. Bye,
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Aubrey.